is he to whom the memories of childhood bring only fear and sadness. Wretched is he who looks back upon lone hours in vast and dismal chambers with brown hangings and maddening rows of antique books, or upon odd watches in twilight groves of grotesque, gigantic, and vine-encumbered trees that silently wave twisted branches far aloft. Such a lot the gods gave to me, the dazed, the disappointed, the barren, the broken. And yet I am strangely content, and cling desperately to those sear memories when my mind momentarily threatens to reach beyond to the other. That is the opening paragraph of H.P. Lovecraft's The Outsider. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Carr-Quest of H.P. Lovecraft. As I've already mentioned, we are reviewing The Outsider. I also actually mentioned it last week. But the story of The Outsider is that there's this mysterious person. He tells us that he doesn't know where he was born. He doesn't know where, he knows very little beyond this abandoned kind of, like, castle where he's lived for a good chunk of his life. That's all he knows is, like, reading from, like, libraries and all these things. And one day, he decides, I use day strongly, he decides to leave the castle. And he's done it before, but it hasn't quite worked out. But this time, he's going to go out, and he is going to see what it's like outside the castle. But it may not be what he expected. So, I've actually read this story before, The Outsider. It's one of Lovecraft's most famous stories. But I've read it before. And here's the thing. I think it's really good. I think it's really good. I don't know why I started off with here's the thing, but other than that I did read it before. But yeah, it's good. It's very, very good. There is a reason that The Outsider is very well known, and I feel, because I did a little bit of research actually into the story not too long ago, and there's some speculation that I found anyway. There's some speculation that the story is almost, in a way, the elements of it are seem semi-autobiographical, because Lovecraft was very much kind of an outsider as a person. He was afraid of a lot of things. He was, and we've talked about we've addressed his xenophobia other than mentioning that his stories have it. But I do feel like reading it, or rather reading it and listening to the great Doug Bradley read it on his YouTube channel. Reading along and listening to it, there's elements of it I feel could be, in a way, autobiographical. Again, sort of tying back to Lovecraft's kind of outsider-ish life. The fact that he was, barely noticed when his stories, came out, other than around, like, his circle of friends and maybe the officials up at Weird Tales where he would publish his stories. But he was very little, he wasn't really known much, when he was alive. And I do feel like, in a way, the way he describes it, and it kind of, in certain paragraphs, it feels very visceral. It feels like Lovecraft is really writing about being someone on the outside. I think, like, one of the best parts is, like, one of the concluding sentences of the story. For although Nepenthe has claimed me, I know always that I am an outsider, a stranger in this century, and among those who are still men. So I think, like, that feels very, it feels very real, and I think that there is an element of realness, of legitimacy, rather, in this story, and, like, talking about being an outsider, and being, again, outside of, you know, society, like Lovecraft kind of was, as I've mentioned time again in this review. And I guess why I'm kind of just sort of stumbling over my words now is just, I don't know what else to really say about the outsider that hasn't been said already, but also that the story is short. I think the next story is a bit longer, but yeah, but either way, I think this is a really good creepy story. I will admit, I haven't mentioned it, but Lovecraft's prose style, I think it's very effective, especially in this story where it's very gothic. Another thing I kind of felt while listening along and reading it, it almost reads like a gothic nightmare or like a gothic dream. A lot of Lovecraft stories are very dreamlike, which is, you know, very, very interesting when you also consider that a lot of his stories and a lot of his characters and a lot of elements within his stories are based around dreams. There's a whole series of stories set in dreamlands, and The Outsider is one of those stories. And so yeah, but it does feel very dreamlike, especially when he's like climbing the tower and he pushes it, and it's like another level of the tower and of the castle, and you're like, what just happened? And a lot of it feels very driven by sort of dream logic, or as much logic as dreams make, as much sense as they make. But his prose style, the actual, like, story, like, as it moves, it's very well paced, and especially in this, as I said, it reads like a gothic nightmare. It's very atmospheric, it's very creepy, it's very, you know, all these things. But there are a few times where Lovecraft must have really loved using a thesaurus or older language, because he uses a lot of very big words. And I'm not saying that having big words is necessarily the problem, it's just sometimes it does kind of make it hard for me to read sometimes, where it's sometimes like, oh, what just happened? And then I have to rewind the video and read it again, and then I'm like, oh, okay, so this is what happened, yeah. But, yes, but that's sort of Lovecraft style, and as much as it does kind of bug me a little bit, it doesn't bug me enough to, especially in this story, or in the last two, it doesn't really bug me too much, because I'm still able to mostly follow what's going on. So that's what really matters here, is that I can understand the story. So yeah, so, oh yes, connections to the greater Lovecraft universe. There's a reference to ghouls, and I think especially when we get to like Dreamlands, and I think actually the next story, ghouls will become very integral to the Lovecraft universe. Although I read that the ghouls talked about here, or at least referenced here, seem different than how ghouls are later portrayed. Again, the next story we're doing, Pickman's model, spoilers, is deals with ghouls, I think. So we'll get more into that. There's also references to Nephrin Ka, which is apparently a name that we'll come across later, though where I can't really remember. There's Neb and Nitocris, which I looked into briefly. It was a Egyptian pharaoh, a pharaoh, and they're also I'm not sure what was it Neb? Yeah, Neb. I don't know what where Neb comes into it. N-E-B. I don't know what that is. But yeah, so ghouls, Nephrin Ka, and the name of the pharaoh. I forget the pharaoh's name already. But those names will come up later, and those creatures will come up later. The ghouls, I mean. But yeah, so that is The Outsider by H.P. Lovecraft. It's a very good story. There is a reason that it is considered one of the best Lovecraft tales. If I was ranking it on the tier list, I would probably put it low S, but maybe at least top of the A. I would put it like, because it is a really, really good story. It's creepy. It's very simple. It's a simple story, but there's a lot you can read out of it, especially when the dream logic really kicks in at certain points. So yeah, so that's The Outsider. I am your host, Andrew Carr. This has been the Carr-Quest of H.P. Lovecraft, and as I've mentioned, the next story, next Saturday, will be Pickman's Model. So see y'all then. Bye.